Hi everyone, just before we get into this episode of Type 1 I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much for pressing play. I really hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, don't forget to hit subscribe and you'll be notified when new episodes come about. You can find us across podcast land on Spotify, iTunes, all those good places as well. Secondly, anything you hear on this podcast should not be taken as medical advice. I am, of course, not a professional, and you do need to seek advice from your healthcare team before making any changes to your diabetes management. And lastly, if you want to say hello, I do have an Instagram page specifically for the Type 1 podcast. You can find it at Studio Type 1 That's at Studio Type 1, the number, on 1, the number. And you can also come and say hello and follow me on my personal page, which is at Miss Jen Greaves. And all of that will be noted in the episode description. Hi everyone, and welcome to Type 1, a podcast that delves into the obscure, complex and challenging world of life with Type 1 diabetes. I'm Jen Greaves, and each week, with the help of some brilliant guests, I'll be showing that there is no normal when it comes to handling this whopper of a chronic condition, because we're all pretty much figuring out the messiness of day-to-day life with diabetes as we go. And most of all, even though it doesn't always feel like it, we are absolutely not alone. We're going to lovely Leith in Edinburgh today to speak to my guest, Isla Munro. In her role as Programme Director and Lecturer in Product Design at the Edinburgh College of Art, alongside heading up the 100 Days Project Scotland, which is no small thing, Isla was keeping herself more than busy back in 2019. The 100 Days Project is a daily creative challenge, and in November of that year, Isla attended an exhibition by one particular participant, Isla's good friend and former Type 1 podcast guest, Alex Russell Baker. Under the name Diabetes by Design, Alex had created 100 incredibly powerful posters to help process her own adult diagnosis while raising awareness of type 1 diabetes. For Isla, that project took on a whole new meaning when 2 years later, almost to the day, she was herself diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 43. I just got goosebumps saying that. Lovely Isla, welcome to Type 1.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. This is such a treat. And what a small world, hey, this whole thing and situation, how you found yourself kind of there 2 years later to the day.
I know. It was incredible because Alex launched her exhibition on the 31st of October, and then my diagnosis was the 4th of November 2 years later. And so she was the first person that I messaged outside the hospital to be like, if you need anyone.
Oh, bless you. That's so sweet. How nice to have that link in what is, you know, as we know and the listeners know, is such a confusing and frightening and an overwhelming time. So we'll get on to that. But how are you today?
I'm good, thanks. I'm good. Yeah, I was working from home today, so I've had time to kind of prepare, and I found myself busying myself and then realised I had to do my Libre change, and I haven't done that. Okay. So that's properly on brand. But yeah, today has been a good day, a fairly calm day. So yeah, I'm doing well, thanks.
Lovely. And the Libre's on standby.
It is.
And we've actually met, which kind of sparked the idea for this as well, because I went to speak at one of Alex's exhibitions in Edinburgh, and we had a good old chinwag about this chaos.
Yeah.
And, it's a lot, isn't it?
I kind of fangirled you a little bit, actually, because I genuinely had I'd heard you speak so many times because I'd been listening to the podcast. Thankfully, I mean, I've got so many things to thank Alex for, but one of the main ones is that she told me about your podcast and I binged you, like proper binged you. So your voice was so familiar because you'd been in my ear for so often. And then I was like, you in the flesh, a real person.
So that voice was attached to a human.
I was like, you're real.
Oh no, it was so lovely. And it came with like such a lovely familiarity, but also I was there seeing your work and your things because it was the time when the project was on as well. Right. And it's a beautiful thing. Like I'd love to start with the art because that is what brings you and Alex together. And that exhibition, as I've witnessed it, is just so incredibly beautiful. And as living with type 1 diabetes are just so incredibly powerful. Was that your introduction to the condition, or did you have any prior knowledge?
No, so I suppose as a type 1, there's a lot of people who've never met another one in the wild, so to speak. But I was quite lucky in that my godparents' third son, who is the same age as my sister, so 50 now, he was diagnosed when he was 10. So we used to visit them in the summer. So I knew a little bit about it. Like there was always are you sure you need another potato? Or, so there was conversations and there was weighing of food and there was a Tupperware in the fridge, but I didn't really know the ins and out of it. And then my best friend at high school, Jackie, who I sat next to in registration, and then was pals with all the way through, she was a type 1 as well. But all I remember from that is her giving me her glucose tablets because I tried one one day and liked it. And now I'm like, why were you giving them to me? Like, stop it.
Oh, sweet though.
So I had a kind of peripheral understanding. But then I knew Alex as part of the creative community, because we're super lucky in Edinburgh. We've got a great creative community. And Alex, when she came to Edinburgh, started a chapter as part of Creative Mornings, which I don't know if you know, but it's a kind of global breakfast seminar thing. So it's fantastic. And that's kind of how I'd met Alex before. So I did something at Creative Mornings to talk about the 100 days, which then meant Alex knew about the 100 days. So it was a kind of perfect alignment, really, when she got her diagnosis and was like, how am I going to work through all of these complex feelings? And as a designer, I mean, as a creative, we often go to I'm going to use the skills that I have in a way to kind of exercise that. So she embarked on something that I would probably advise people in the 100 days not to do, because she gave herself so much. But she did it amazingly. And I think by the end of the 100 days project, she'd managed something like 65 posters, which of course, as we know, didn't come alone. They came with a nugget of really well researched information. So I'd been kind of lapping up that project all the way through, and was just there was so much that I didn't know about a condition that I had kind of peripheral knowledge of for decades. So I was constantly like, whoa, I never knew that. And what, coffee, no carbs, but what? So every day when I read one of her pieces as it popped up, I was just gobsmacked. So yeah, I think when I actually sat in the diagnosis, I knew terminology that I probably would never have known had I not seen the artwork and therefore the information that went along with it. So yeah, it was incredible, actually.
Wow. And definitely we're going to come into the diagnosis, but I'd love to speak to you just before we get into all of that about the power of art and the way it can communicate things. Like for me, the way I relate to it, like I would say I'm very creative. I've done more writing than art, but certainly this is all part of it, 100%, in terms of like processing emotions, how you feel, how you see the world, making sense of things. Like I know you love your job as a lecturer, so I'd just like to hear you talk a little bit about that.
Oh, I love it. Well, I think it's important to sort of maybe talk about the reasons that I started doing the 100 days in the first place, because I think, and I don't know if you ever find this working in quite a creative industry anyway, and being creative, sometimes the work that we do leaves no time for us to be kind of personally creative. We're being professionally creative, and my job as a lecturer is to kind of facilitate the creativity of others. And so I think I joined the project when it belonged to, not that I own it, but when a graphic designer in New Zealand called Emma Rogan had started, I think, the project in 2011. And I'd come across a TED talk that she'd done and was super inspired by it. And about 2 years in a row, I'd said, I'm going to do that. And then I never did it. And I was like, if you don't make time for it, and if you don't do it, you're never going to do it. So I realized that I needed kind of collective accountability, because I will never let my friends down, but I constantly could be perceived as letting myself down, because I'll put myself at kind of that bottom of the rung. And if I cancel something that I've put in, that's okay, but I would never cancel on someone else. So I thought, right, okay, well, I need to get other people involved then, so that I'm not letting anyone down, which I should probably talk to somebody about, but
no, I can relate.
Decided to do it. I signed up for it, and then I booked a space in the university for what would be day 103. And I said, I'm going to put on an exhibition, and it might be
oh my goodness,
it might be a solo exhibition, or if I find other people that want to come along with me, they can do it. And I posted all that on social media, and we ended up with quite a cluster of people in Edinburgh, because I just told everybody that I met, by the way, I'm doing this. Do you fancy doing it? You're quite creative. You draw. Why don't you get involved? And we ended up with this cluster of people. And when Emma Rogan said she was going to step away in 2018, I'd kind of approached her already and said, we're already a day behind you, because in New Zealand, you kind of meet the sun first. So if we could do something more Scottish based and remain affiliated, would you be up for it? And she was like, have it, go do it. That's, have fun. So that's when it started in 2018. And year on year, I kind of count the days for people. So we start at a particular time, and then each day I post something. It used to be I'd like hunt for door numbers or numbers out in the wild, like bus timetables and things like that. And now I've kind of put it all together, and I'm doing my own work as the daily count, and then kind of bringing people together. But it's interesting that you're saying about writing rather than kind of art, but we have loads of different people taking part, and writing's often a really big part of that. I had one of our particular kind of, I was going to say repeat offenders, so I don't mean it that way, but somebody that came, like a serial
Returner.
100-dayer, a returning 100-dayer, Kirsty. She's wonderful, and she's a wordsmith and poet and English teacher, and just wonderful human being generally. But she's done everything from Padoku, which was a Sudoku but using poetry. So she'd take 9 words and resolve it in some sort of poetry, which is just mind-boggling. One year she did limericks, and because she's got a wicked sense of humour, a lot of them were quite smutty and quite hilarious. And she did a flexicon as well, where she was making up words and coming up with new definitions of things. So there's lots of different avenues of creativity that the project brings out, and it's just that daily repetition of a practice, where by the end of it you don't really realize that you're going to get better at whatever it is you're doing by the very nature of repeating something. So it's a brilliant project. I love it, and I can say that because I can't take responsibility for it, because it started with a guy in America, I think at Yale, Michael Beirut, who came up with it as a summer project for people. So we've kind of just co-opted it and have been using it. But yeah.
I don't know. Well, all credit to him, but equally, I've seen the work that goes into what you do for the exhibition, and the stuff that's produced. It's phenomenal, and it's all under kind of your guise and leadership. So
Yes.
We're going to give you credit. I will give you credit. If you will not give yourself credit, I'm here to do that.
I will take credit. That's fine. Yeah.
But it's lovely to hear you speak about it and the way you light up. And it does make you think. I think so much of us neglect the little hobbies and pursuits that we love as children, and art was just such a massive one of mine. And obviously we all express ourselves in different ways through different things through our lives, but it's a nice reminder to go back and play as well, you know.
And I think the interesting thing is, I mean, play is, we could spend an entire podcast talking just about play and how important it is. And as designers and creatives, we have to do that as part of our process. So, and it's kind of bashed out of us by society. And this kind of, as we grow up, people say to us, oh, you can't do that. That's childish. But it's like, there's childlike and childish, and there's playful. And I think we need to be careful not to sort of adult all of that out of us. It's so integral to who we are as a species. I think I found, certainly my experience was, art and design were always seen as additional subjects to be added on and appended to things, rather than the subject itself. And I mean, we saw it during the pandemic.
I was literally going to say that.
Well, that was the thing. It's like, when so much stopped, everybody relied on the creative industries, whether that was through broadcasting, through television, film, through art, through the kind of
music,
the kind of recording of the outdoors in creative ways, whether it was people going out sketching or taking photographs, and so much of our lives needed that. And I think it's doing it a disservice when people just kind of plug it into the side. And I think we need to do more about that. And hopefully that's something that I'm kind of teaching my students, that this is an integral pursuit. But
wonderful. Have you found, this is a bit of a side question, I guess, but have you used art at all to kind of help you through your own diagnosis that you can think of? Whether it's, I guess a lot of it might be subconscious in that you're just expressing yourself in a way, but is there
Yeah.
anything that you
So
can pinpoint?
I think it might have been quite soon after being diagnosed. I suddenly had access to these bar graphs or the graphs in the Libre data that I was getting. So every day I was seeing this kind of line, and I kind of used drawing. So one of my projects, like I think I only got to about day 26, and I lost it a little bit because the trying to run the project and do my own work and everything, of course, that comes with type 1. I think it was the year that I was diagnosed. So it would have been the summer of 2022 following the diagnosis. And I was just like, no, I can't, it's too much. But there was a couple of those days where I treated those graphs rather than information about what my blood was doing. They were kind of referencing what I was doing on the day. So there was one day that it was a bit of a roller coaster, but I just turned that into grass and drew a tennis ball on it.
Aww.
And that was me out in the park with my dog. And so I suppose I tried, but I think this is the thing. I'm too much of a designer and less of an artist, in that a lot of what I do is about communicating information rather than it just being for the sake of being. And so I haven't quite done it yet. And I worry that maybe if I tried, it would be a poor cousin to what Alex is doing, because she's done it so well. So we'll maybe see. It might be a little later, because I was actually only yesterday said to my friend that I need to inject more life into my life. And obviously creativity is a huge part of that. So maybe this year.
Okay. Well, I enjoyed the little pun on inject there as well. Which segues us so seamlessly into talking about your diagnosis.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, sort of detailing, I guess, I think you had quite a long runway, if I'm not mistaken. If you wouldn't mind talking to me about what happened in the kind of weeks and months leading up to it.
Absolutely. So at the time I was freelancing alongside being a lecturer. So I was a sort of fractional member of staff. So I was working half of my week at the art college, and then I was kind of subsidizing that with freelance work and running the 100 Days project alongside that. So through, well, what year was it? It was 2021. So it was we were kind of in and out of lockdown still. There was still a bit of a weird hangover from the pandemic. And when the kind of exhaustion started, I had just assumed that it was related to that, because when the first lockdown happened in the March of 2020, we got like a week's notice at university from them closing and then saying, right, you have to teach online. And it was kind of whiplash from that. And we were just all kind of running to try and keep delivering these really practical, creative, community-based things through a screen where, let's face it, most people kept their screens off and kept themselves muted when you weren't talking. And so it was this kind of weird time. So the hangover from the pandemic, I think I attributed the tiredness to when it started coming. And also at the time, I'd been given the opportunity to do a crowdfunder for the 100 Days. I kind of got to the end of that, and I was, again, even more exhausted and just thought, I don't know what this is. And I remember going on holiday with a set of friends, and we were trying to walk up a hill, and I was just exhausted. And it was like my limbs were lead, and I was so thirsty, and I was so tired and so emotional, because I was just like, I'm this kind of tired, unfit person spoiling my friend's holiday. So I didn't allow myself any rest. So I would kind of catch up with them and then keep going. And then I had a bit of a panic attack on the hill, because I was just like, what's going on? And after that, I went to the doctor, and I was like, I'm starting to feel like there's something not quite right. And of course, phone doctor's appointments at that point, because it was lockdown. And because I was so emotional and tired, and I had experienced in the past kind of mental health issues with kind of depression and anxiety, I just presumed it was that again, because there were very familiar feelings. And the doctor, I imagine, being utterly overwhelmed, just went, you know yourself, you know your body, let's just put you back on what you were on before. And there was a part of me that kind of rallied for a couple of weeks, because I felt like I'd taken control and I was doing something about it. But then we were still teaching online and I was just exhausted. And we got to, so that was kind of throughout the summer. And we got to the end of October of the 2021. And I went to the doctors in person. I said, no, I absolutely need you to do a panel. I need you to do something. I need you to check thyroid, whatever it might be, just something's not right. And I got a phone call that evening, and the person who was phoning the doctor on call was like, are you feeling like you've got pains in your stomach? Are you? And he started describing some of the symptoms of DKA. And I immediately realized that he was talking about DKA when he said your glucose is really high. And I was like, I've read Alex's post about this. I know this sounds like DKA. And I was like, no, I'm feeling awful, because obviously that's why I got my blood test done, but I'm not feeling in jeopardy. And he was like, okay, so book an appointment with your doctor and we'll speak about it. So I phoned the doctor, weirdly the same doctor that phoned Alex for her diagnosis.
Oh my gosh.
And went in to see her. And the way that I found out that I had diabetes was when she tested, obviously, the urine for the ketones. And she said, yeah, there's some ketones in here, not very many, but we've got a little tweak on the ketones. And I went, oh, so it's diabetes then. And she went, oh, you've definitely got diabetes. It's just figuring out which type you've got. And I was like, oh, that's a really nice way of finding out I've got this lifelong condition, whatever it might be. So, and I don't think, I mean, she's a wonderful doctor, but I don't think she realised how abrupt that was. So she couldn't get through to the unit at that point. So sent me away and said, would you be able to come back to a hospital appointment later if I phoned? I was like, yeah. So got a phone call like an hour later. Please go up to your metabolic unit at the Western General. Can you get there yourself? And I was like, yeah. So drove up, and as I was parking the car and putting my Ringo in, I texted Alex and said, by the way, if you need anyone to test drive your companion cards idea that you've got, I'm just going in for what will probably be a diagnosis, so let me know. And yeah, essentially sat in this room with, again, a lovely consultant and a brilliant DSN who tested my blood, tested my ketones, and obviously kind of took my history. And when somebody sort of asks you to list things out, you all of a sudden realize all of these things that you've been kind of justifying as something else. It was when they were asking my familial history that I started going, oh, well, actually, my great uncle died in a diabetic coma when he was 19. And when I kind of said this to the doctor, he was like, actually, that's not a close enough link for that to be a kind of obvious precursor to the condition. I was like, right, okay. I was like, my dad got an autoimmune condition when he was in his 40s. It was kind of like a stressed induced thing, but his was more neurological. I think it's called CIDP, chronic inflammatory polyradial neuropathy. I've probably done that completely wrong, but mad thing where you lose kind of feeling in your body. Thankfully, he's absolutely fine now. But when I'd said about him having an autoimmune condition, I was like, I kind of follow my father's side of my genetics. He said it's more than likely, we're going to do the tests, so we're going to figure out if there's antibodies in there. But we have to kind of build into the thought here that it might be type 2 or it might be type 1. I think it's type 1, and then he asked me the weirdest question. He said, which one would you prefer? Like,
oh, do you get a choice?
I was like, I wasn't aware that one got to choose what chronic condition they wanted. And it was kind of echoed later when they sent me away from the hospital appointment with the kind of bag of stuff, but they sent me away with the brochure, the information booklet for type 1 and the information booklet for type 2.
How did they determine that it was type 1?
So they did antibody tests. There was 3 different tests that they did, and I can't remember what they're called now, but there was one in particular that was quite a new antibody test. And they had things like a kind of normal range is like 5. And I was like 100 and something. And then the other one was like the normal range is like between 7 and 10. And I was like 170 or something. So it's like there were so many antibodies in my system. And I think when I started to backtrack, I'd actually been unwell for maybe about 5 or 6 months before that the first kind of symptoms had started coming. But it was such a slow roll that actually my blood glucose was 22 when I was diagnosed. So I was lucky in the sense that I didn't go into DK. I didn't need to be in hospital, but it did mean that due to kind of lockdown and so on, the lovely Gail, my DSN, taught me how to inject, gave me some advice, gave me the all important, if you're going to have a bottle of wine, have a chippy afterwards advice, which was very important. And then just kind of sent me on my way. And I didn't see another consultant for almost a year after that.
Wow.
So I was just kind of on my own. So yeah, it was whiplash was quite incredible.
Yeah, I think you've raised a really good piece of awareness there about that slow creep. I think that does occur when you're in a busy adult life. You know, there are days where you just don't feel great, but and like piecing that together backwards is obviously 2020. But you know, with the instances of adult diagnosis increasing, I think that's going to be a common experience for people.
Yeah.
But my goodness me, what a lot to take on. You know, you've got this one brochure, but it's not like that is the textbook way of doing type 1 diabetes. Off you go. That's absolutely wild.
But the interesting thing was that, I do wonder if part of it is the more kind of, and this is going to sound terrible, so I'm probably being quite clumsy with my words, but almost like the more competently you're able to speak about a condition, people assume you're okay. And I think in the diagnosis with the consultant, who weirdly was somebody that Alex was speaking with for her project as well, so it's so intertwined. When he was talking about basal rates and bolusing and things, I knew what he was talking about because of diabetes by design. And so he was able to shortcut maybe some of the explanations, because I would speak back to him when he would say what it is. I'd go, oh, it's that, you mean? And he was like, oh yeah. So we kind of fast forwarded through that. And I think it's happened as well that anytime I've spoken to any of my healthcare team, which I must underline have been brilliant the entire time, albeit that I don't see them as regularly as I would like, they've always been great. They look at my figures and they go, oh, you're doing brilliantly. It's like,
but at what cost? Well, everywhere else. Yeah, I think. Yeah, there's so much in that, isn't there? And I as you say, like the care teams are brilliant and everyone is doing their best and all of those things. But like these numbers, I've had good numbers and I've been running myself absolutely ragged to get there. And it's like, where's the balance? And particularly, for the best will in the world, you probably did have more knowledge than most, but living with it is such a different thing. So how did you find that, having then just being sort of sent back out into the world and having to go straight into you don't get a practice, do you, once that diagnosis comes?
Well, I think I am, I kind of, it's going to sound a bit bizarre, but I kind of treated it like a new hobby. And I think and I don't know whether this is why, I don't know if it's my personality is kind of like this because I'm now in academia, this is the way that my brain works, or whether I'm in academia because this is the way that my brain works. But I just was like, right, I'm going to learn everything I possibly can learn about this, knowing that I do not have a scientific mind. But I was like, I'm going to learn what I need to understand this condition, and then maybe I can understand it better about how it's affecting me. And I think I have lived blissfully ignorant about a lot of my body for a lot of years. Like, I often have felt maybe a little bit disconnected from it, like I wasn't really aware of what was going on. And I think I was really lucky that when I was diagnosed, I've not really gone through a phase of anger about it. I'm not really angry about it. I'm sad about it because of the impact that it's had on my life so far and the impact that it will continue to have on my life. And sometimes I can that gets a little bit to the top. But in the majority, I am just so bloody grateful that the rest of my body is doing what it's supposed to. Because, again, a bit of information that I learned from one of the posters was only 2% of my pancreas is actually not working. Like, I can't hate on my pancreas too much because it's still doing other things. But like that, just 2% has had such a profound impact. Like, what other miraculous things is my body doing? And I've got no idea about it. And on top of that, I've been actively, like through not sleeping and drinking like a sailor in my 20s, like, and I'm not lying, 30s and 40s as well. But like those sorts of things now where I'm like, oh my God, I can see instantly the effect that having a coffee or not having a good night's sleep or not hydrating enough has on one aspect of my health, it makes me go, oh my goodness, like all of the things that I could have been doing or should have been doing before. It's kind of bonkers.
Yeah, I still find that quite hard to wrap my head around. I didn't obviously get to that point for a long time, but certainly
Yeah.
now, as someone who pushes their body quite a lot, does a lot of things, like, similar to you, juggling things. And I think, God, the amount of work that this is, just this
Mm.
2% of one
Mm.
organ, like you say, like the rest of my body's actually phenomenal. Like,
Yeah.
and I think it's only because we have this acute awareness of what we've not got
Yeah.
that we can appreciate then the things that we do have. And to then be faced with like, I hate this some days and I really don't want to do this today. And like, will you just please behave? Like to kind of flip-flop between. I don't know if that's something that you've kind of grappled with or...
Yeah, well, I think because of the, on the vein of I'm going to treat this like a new hobby, I'm going to learn everything I possibly can. And that included binging wonderful podcasts like yourself. And
very
I was
kind.
also, through listening to you, introduced to Owen Costello on the Insuloan podcast. So listened a lot to them. I say them because him and Graham's chat, absolutely hilarious. But I think what I ended up doing was thinking too much about it, and I gave it too much of my brain, and I wanted too much to be in control of it. And of course, as we know, there's certain things that I can do, but there's so many more things that are completely out with my control. And even when I do all of the things I can control, it still will jump up and hit me in the face and go, no, that's not going to work. Or, oh, you forgot this one of the kind of 42 things that can go wrong. So yeah, I think I let it take up too much of my brain. But going back to the wonderful health team that I happen to have, is we have a psychologist on the staff in the metabolic unit in the Western General at Edinburgh. And because of the impact that it was having, I spoke to one of my DSNs and I was like, I wonder if you've got anyone that I can speak to. And I was expecting to be on a waiting list for months and months and months before I'd be able to speak to anyone. And I don't know what, there maybe just became a gap in the calendar at the right time, but I managed to see someone quite quickly. And I was speaking to somebody for on and off and not incredibly regularly. It was kind of, to start with, it was about every 2 weeks for a couple of months, and then it moved to monthly, and then it was 3 monthly. But it was about a year and a bit that I spoke to somebody. And just the act of saying out loud to somebody who worked in that area, how difficult it is on some days, how like some days it takes 100% of my brain, let alone 50% of it, to remember to do all the things you have to remember, or not be so unimaginably annoyed that you can't go to bed early because you have to take your background insulin at a certain time, or falling asleep on the sofa and waking up at 3 a.m. and going, okay, I'm going to have to work that back over the next few days to get myself level. And so I think, yeah, they were really useful for helping work through some of that. But equally, things like hearing you on your podcast say time and happiness as well as time and range, like, that was a penny dropping moment, because I was chasing that green all the time and wanting to see my figures being as high as they could be because I'm an overachiever, and realizing that there was still loads that I could sit within to be able to have a good time while I was doing it and not take it so seriously. But it's also like, how do you not take something seriously that could literally kill you if you do it wrong, but it's just, yeah, it's so full of contradictions.
Truly.
And it's so infuriating.
Truly. And at the same time, it's like, we're still doing the thing. Like, I've still got my job. And I just need to shout out Camille Nerdabetic for the time and happiness thing. I have to credit him for coming up with that, because I do think it isn't just about the numbers as much as we want them to be in range. But I spoke to my consultant at one point, and he was like, that me sat here as a person without type 1 diabetes is not 100% in your range ever. And I was like,
yeah.
what did you find like the most frustrating in terms of, you said there, like these little day-to-day things, because there's obviously the testing and the dosing and the very medical side of things, which, you know, you are taught about, but all these extra layers on top, like, was there anything in particular where you were like, well, that's very different to what it looked like before, just in terms of like having that adult diagnosis and the very memorable before and after versus, you know, I can't really remember. I
don't. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think there's been a few conversations that I've borne witness to, either on podcasts or that I've had with friends, about would it be better to be diagnosed as a young person and then that's the majority of your life, you know, that thing, or would it be better to have had all of those, kind of go through the difficult times like puberty and stuff like that, and then be diagnosed? And I suppose the really important point is we don't know any better, and we could never know any better or different, should I say. So, but I think there's been such different, it's cast such a different tone on so many things, but yet some days don't feel that different at all, that I sometimes find that I'm being kind of melodramatic about it, because actually the impact of it is I just have to remember a few more things than I did before. And I think a lot of the changes that I've had to make are actually quite positive ones. And so, without kind of wanting to be too positive about it, because I remember in diagnosis, the doctor had said, you know, a lot of type 1 diabetics find that they are healthier as a result of the diagnosis than they were before. And I'm like, yeah, but, and then, you know, a few years down the line, I'm here going, well, actually, I quit drinking about a year ago. And that wasn't just because of diabetes, but it was a little bit of a, maybe I should start respecting the other organs unless I want to maybe start doing the job of those as well. So I think on the day-to-day, yes, there's that churn of things that we have to do. I think I do less in my life than I used to. And I think I need to do a bit of work to find the balance within that, because I think what I've done is I've removed a lot of the me, because there's the dutiful stuff that I have to do. So, you know, I'm fully employed with the University of Edinburgh now, you know, that's me full time. So I don't have to do the freelance anymore, which is great on one hand, because I don't have to worry about that income and kind of churning for work. But also what I realized in that first year after diagnosis is I was using just my freelance time to deal with the impact of diabetes. So any days that I was, you know, recovering from kind of like 3 days of highs overnight, or, you know, 3 days at work with hypos because I hadn't quite understood how much I was going to be running around. And then the latter 2 days of the week where I wasn't at uni, I was basically recovering from, you know, like a T1D hangover. But I would use my freelance days because I wasn't accountable to anyone but me. But then, of course, that was having a financial impact, as well as also probably giving my employer, you know, not really a good indication of some of that flexibility and reasonable adjustment that I might need. So then when I went kind of later on and said, actually, I'm going full time, but now, you know, which is great. And from a financial benefit, it's fantastic, because it means that I don't have that sort of precariousness that us freelancers can sometimes have. There is also the flip side of that, in that you now have to do the reasonable adjustments that I was previously doing for myself. And thankfully, working in academia, I've got a certain amount of autonomy, and I'm in charge of my time. Apart from the timetabled time, I can kind of work things around. But yeah, it proved challenging. I think previously one of the big changes was I used to liberally skip meals or push things back, or, you know, not get up early enough to have breakfast and all those sorts of things. And my diabetes very quickly showed me what kind of effect that was having on my body. So yeah, I think they've been small and big changes. Sometimes I don't feel any of them, and it's just this thing that comes around with me. And then other days it's like, oh, everything's different.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
There's so much in there. I feel like I could just speak to you for days, honestly. Yeah, because I've often said when I say, oh, I'm freelance, it's often with the caveat of like, that's a luxury I have because my time is mine. But you're so right. Like
Mm.
the pressure that comes with that. And then the kind of not like if I attend medical appointments or I need a day off because type 1 has hit me over the head, like, that's income gone or
Yeah.
etc. That that all of this is like six of one, half a dozen of the other, of course. But
I know.
it's just interesting to hear you articulate it there. This episode of Type 101 is sponsored by Dexcom. Using Dexcom CGM has given me so much confidence to make informed diabetes treatment decisions in the moment. You can choose to wear it on your arm or your abdomen, which is so great to give those sites a break. And all Dexcom CGMs have the share and follow feature, even when connected to an insulin pump. So your family and friends can see your glucose levels and get alerts, giving that extra bit of support when needed. Head to Dexcom.com to request your free Dexcom ONE Plus sample. Always read the user manual for important product aspect and limitations. Talk to your doctor for diabetes management terms and conditions and terms of use. That dealing with the impact of things that you mentioned, have you found that that's got less as you've moved through and maybe understood a bit more about how your body works and just got used to what the condition entails in general? Or do you think it's still something that kind of keeps you guessing, I guess?
Well, I suppose this is probably a good time to mention actually the kind of self-advocacy I did a year ago, almost to the day actually, after chatting with you and at the Q&A at the Diabetes by Design Festival that we had, and you were telling the story about changing insulin, and I'd kind of put my hand up like a keen bean from the front row and asked how you did that. I, in one of my meetings with my psychologist, had said, I see the consultant for so little time, and it's often quite frustrating because the consultant that I'm seeing is a different consultant each time because they work as a team and you get rotated. So I've not seen the same doctor more than once. And there's normally a tick box that we have to go through. And I kind of lose my voice in some of those circumstances. And or I get told I'm doing a great job and then it feels weird to ask a question. And I wasn't sure how to do it. And so when I asked the question, she was like, well, let's rehearse. What do you want to say? And I, of course, reeled off this bloody lovely, eloquent thing. And she was like, just say that, it's fine. And I was like, yes, but this was different. But she wrote it on a postcard for like a post-it note for me. And I went into my appointment weirdly the next day. So they'd kind of abutted against each other. And I kind of had my post-it note and I was ready. Like, I'm going to say this and I'm going to ask to be changed from Novorapid to Fiasp. And I'm going to ask about my background insulin, about splitting it. And I'm going to ask about being put on a pump. And that was my list. And the consultant that I got that day, and I really wish I could remember her name, which is terrible, because she was brilliant. She was the most engaged. She asked so many questions. She listened to me when I was talking about my management. We had really intelligent conversation about the reason why I'm making those decisions. That on the first hand, she went, oh, why are you doing that? And it looks on here like you're stacking your insulin. And I'm like, well, because this is the reality of living with an insulin that doesn't work for 45 minutes. Like I can't dose for a whole meal because then it all hits at one, blah, blah, blah. So we had these conversations and she listened to me rather than telling me what I needed to do. And after that, she was like, I'll go and speak to the main consultant and we'll ask about these three things. But she'd actually brought up being on a pump first and said I was a good candidate, so put me on a list. She went away and asked, saying not many people change their insulin, but, so managing my expectations, but came back in saying, yep, let's do that. And it was just one of the best experiences because I was listened to, I asked for what I needed, and I was given what I was needed in an informed and sort of good way. And so many of those things and impacts that I was feeling from diabetes shifted because Novorapid works brilliantly for so many people, but I hadn't realized how much it was not working for me. So the routines that I used to fight to try and get and couldn't really manage because I love my sleep more than my breakfast and those sorts of things. When I'd been trying to struggle with that with Novorapid and having foot to floor, so waking up already, getting high as soon as I woke up, trying then to wake up early enough to take Novorapid so that then I could wait an hour before I could eat. It just wasn't working. Whereas now with Fiasp, I've rediscovered apples because I did 3 years almost without apples.
Oh,
Because they're just a little sugar bomb for me. So if I wanted an apple, I would have to take Nova Rapid and then wait like 45 minutes to an hour before I could eat the apple, and I would still get a spike. And I know we will always see our blood go up and down, but the spikes were quite high, and I feel the hyper quite a lot.
that's not
Um,
nice, is it? On top
yeah,
of
that kind of
the
pressure
actual number.
headache, and
Yeah.
yeah. And because so much of my time is spent trying to be really patient with students, um, being in hyper is just not conducive for being a patient lecturer with young folk. It just doesn't. Oh. Um, so yeah, the switch to Fiasp has opened up a whole new routine for me. So I'm able to get up in the morning. My little lazy little dog sleeps on the bed until I've finished eating my breakfast and have my coffee. And then we go out for a walk. So that sorts out my 10-minute walk afterwards. And I'm actually able to, apart from a couple of summer hypos where I've kind of misjudged the heat or misjudged the length of the walk and I've not been able to drive into work, I've managed to get into this really nice kind of morning routine. But yeah, the switch to Fiasp has literally been, without being kind of hyperbolic, it's been life changing.
Wow. I'm just beaming. These little things, the apple, like that's so demonstrative of something that seemingly nothing to an outside eye, but like these pleasures in life, these simple things, just being able
Mm,
to get up at the time that you want to get up and have that time to enjoy
mm,
your breakfast without just being like, well, I'm going to be tired all day now because I have to get up at
yeah,
5 a.m. just to wait for this insulin to work or
yeah.
whatever. Like I'm being hyperbolic there, but being able to go into that appointment. And I love that tip about having the post-it note
Oh
with
yeah.
the things written down of what you
Mhm.
want to say.
Yeah. And
That's very helpful.
interestingly, I didn't actually need to use it, but just having it meant that I knew I could look at it if I needed to. And actually, as you know, Jess, my lovely psychologist, knew, I was able to articulate that. I would have been able to articulate that even without her help. But actually, I wasn't aware of that. I didn't realize that I could just sit down and say, I know myself really well now. Like I have a surprising knowledge of my body and this condition. And to the point where I've got my appointment next week with my consultant, and I'm kind of ready for a bit of a fight because I'm quite an intuitive doser. I'm still on MDI. I'm still using my Fiasp and then my Lantus overnight. Um, but I stack insulin, which is not medically recommended, but I think that is by people who aren't type 1 diabetics and don't understand that when you're living with this, you don't know that you're going to have a sticky toffee pudding when you start your meal. So of course I'm going to have to dose for that later. And of course it's going to be in the same, time that the first dose is working on. But I'm not going to not have the sticky toffee pudding if I'm in a fancy restaurant.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, I think it's that confidence to know that as much as medical professionals are wonderful, and thank goodness for the NHS, as much as they know, unless they're living with the condition or living so adjacent to the condition that they have that intimate awareness, like their sibling or their parents or their or kids have them, live with type 1 diabetes, then yeah, I know my body better. And I don't think I'd ever have been able to say that 4 years ago. I know my body well. I just don't think it would have come out of my mouth. Whereas now I know my body. And it still surprises me that I can feel something coming. Because some days I can't. Some days I have moments and I'm like, it jumps up and smacks me in the face. And I'm like, wow, that came out of nowhere. But other times I'm like checking my phone before the alarms go off. And that always makes me go, I do know you.
Yes. Wow. And I think as well, like when I've gone in with a more of an idea about what I want from the appointment, more often these days for sure, like it has been met with quite a collaborative
Mm,
mindset. Like, okay, let's figure out a way that this works. Let's work together.
yeah,
Um, like the expertise alongside the intuition and being the person living with the thing.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's really hopeful. Do you feel like it empowered you beyond, like in other ways?
yeah. It has actually, because since then, and again, this is probably something that we could do a whole other podcast on, but since then I went back to my GP and started the conversation about the big perimenopause, which of course is a whole other kettle of fish really for women of a certain age. And I, because of my experience dealing with my diabetes team and the fact that actually going in armed with information is positive, and if it is met with that collaborative approach is welcome. So when I started kind of putting two and two together as to why I was feeling some of the things that I was feeling, because of course we have a tendency to just, well, I'm not going to lump everybody in. I have a tendency now, if I'm feeling something, my brain immediately goes to, that's a type 1 thing. I'm feeling this because maybe there's something that I'm not aware of. And I think it's just because I'm hyper vigilant about that. But of course, these other things that were happening, and I realized that it was maybe that start of the hormones starting to do their thing and my body starting to go through its next phase. So I printed out the nice guidelines, this nice kind of summary guidelines for dealing with women that are about to go through menopause. And I went in armed to speak to my GP, my very lovely GP, who I pretty much knew would be okay with just seeing what we could do to treat and these symptoms that I was feeling. But I thought, I'm going to go in armed with the knowledge that they, as a GP service, have to provide this basic approach to somebody who walks in and says, I know my body, something is different. Can we have a conversation about HRT? And she didn't need me to bring out the nice guidelines. And we had a lovely conversation, and she suggested that I started HRT. And I've been too chicken to try it because, as we know, I say we know, I didn't know for such a long time that insulin was a hormone until I became a part of this type 1 diabetes world. And of course, when my body started, when I started kind of putting two and two together about hormones and the fluctuations, and of course the impact that menstruation has on my dosing levels. So I'm a different ratio in the period coming up to the bleeding starting in the menstruation cycle. So now I was like, right, okay, what's going to happen when I introduce estrogen, and I introduce estrogen and progesterone? If it's already fluctuating, how am I going to deal with that? And so I kind of sat with the patches, not doing anything, just kind of winking at me every now and again. I'm like, oh. So I literally started, I'm on my second patch. And
Wow.
I have had more hypos in the last week than I've had in a really long time. Kind of back to back to back. And so part of me is like, because I'm starting, I think, another phase of honeymoon retreat, because I was in honeymoon phase probably for about under a year, and kind of just started upping my background when I realized that there was changes on the advice of my DSN. And they were just like, next time you need to up it, let us know. But I just kind of just went on my own and just knew my body and figured it out. But I got up to the original dose that they'd put me on. But recently I've started to tweak and go up a little bit more. And I think basically me tweaking my background and putting the HRT patches on at the same time has created a kind of perfect storm of maybe a little bit too much background. And then estrogen, which of course is when the ratios, you're kind of more insulin sensitive rather than less in the whole cycle. So yeah, I have been bumping off the bottom all week. Yeah.
You know so much. I'm just sat here like, wow. It's incredible to me that you've taken this on in this way. And you're sort of saying that, like, you know, I had this hypo week. How do you deal with these? You said you didn't feel angry. I mean, what's your kind of relationship to the word acceptance, I guess, is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one because I as a person, anger is not really something that I do very often, to the point where it kind of surprises me when I get angry, and to the point where when I'm grumpy with people, it's really noticeable because it's kind of doesn't happen that often. I think it's happened a lot more since living with type 1 diabetes, I'm not going to lie, because there's been a lot of either hypo or hyper emotions attached to it, or just tired, decision fatigue kind of stuff coming in there. So I think I have been more emotionally active, shall we say. But I think I accepted it quite quickly. And I think a lot of that had to do with there being so many examples of people out in the world living great lives with it, that, you know, there wasn't the sadness of the unknown, like this is the end of something as I know it. It's just like, well, this is just shifting into a different gear. I'm going to have to prioritize different things. And so I think acceptance came quite quickly. And that's not to say that I'm happy with it, because there's still days where I get really sad about the fact that I'm having to inject myself every single day. And I, you know, the background insulin, it's funny because as I go through the day, the boluses, they're kind of just, I do that. But the background, because I have to make such a concerted effort to remember, because they're not attached to an action like eating or, you know, having a coffee or thinking about something else that's happening alongside that. And because I hate going to bed early. It's something I need to sort out. But because of that, I'm never in the same place when I'm doing my background. It's not like every single night I'm going to bed at the same time and I'm taking my background and it's attached to that routine. So that's normally when I get a bit sad, is like, oh, I'm never just going to be able to have a carefree evening where I don't do this. But they're less often, which is good. Yeah.
And with that, how are you feeling sort of going into this new chapter, new evolution into the perimenopause, starting HRT alongside diabetes? Like, how, just because I know that so many women are going through it, and there's just not that much research out there, and there's not that much information out there, and there are some incredible people making changes to that. But just for other listeners who might be going into the same phase of life, I'd love to hear how you're feeling.
So I'm incredibly lucky that I have some really, really good friends in my sort of support network. One of my friends so my beloved pal from university, Alexis, she is a born researcher. So I kind of learn all the things I need to know about perimenopause from her, because she kind of hit it like, well, it kind of hit her like a bus actually a few years back. But she is so exceptionally good at researching, and has had to advocate for herself so much in a health space that there are so many things that I've managed to learn from her, that again, I went into appointments or I went into research already knowing some of it, because she'd had to battle some of those things. So the whole shared experience is so important. And that's why things like your podcast is so important, or seeing other people that are speaking about their lived experience or sharing their medical knowledge about these things is so important. So I've been seeking out different places and podcasts and information streams about menopause and perimenopause. And I'm trying to avoid the kind of commercializing of perimenopause that's been happening, because it has turned into, it feels a little bit like it's turning into that same space that the kind of health and well-being space has turned into. It's like, oh, well, we can just make money off this because half the population is going to go through this. It's like, oh, how about you put money into doing really good research?
Yeah, we're not going to research it or fix it. We're just going to charge you for it.
We're just going to charge you for it and tell you, we're going to tell you that everything that you think's wrong with you now is because of the perimenopause, and then we're going to sell you this supplement. And it's like, how about we do research, we figure out what happens to our miraculous bodies. But I think what I need to do is maybe grab on to some of this healthy female rage that's probably going to bubble up in my hormones, and use it to just figure out what I need, dispense with the stuff that I don't, and just keep advocating for myself. And I think I can do that because I've got powerful women next to me who have either already done it or are doing it. And I think it's probably just about making sure that I talk to people loudly about what it is that we're going through. Because I think asking my mum about the process that she went through at perimenopause, she doesn't remember a lot of it. She was very stoic about it. She just kind of got on with it. She kind of describes it as she got hot and stuck there for a while. but I know that there would have been so many more complex things happening that she just didn't have any avenue to talk about. Like nobody talked about it. Whereas I'm like, let me tell you about. So yeah.
I mean, the way you speak there, if you take menopause out and put diabetes in, like it's how like your approach to this in terms of I need to go find the information for myself, and I need to discard what isn't going to hit or isn't going to connect, and be
Yeah.
discerning as well as being in tune with your own body to then go and ask the questions and advocate for what you need. Like, yeah, that's a potent recipe for hopefully kind of moving through these different chapters as they come through, whether that's pregnancy or menopause or diagnoses or other things that really turn our worlds upside down. And yeah, I think that's profound, but also super practical. Yeah, so credit
Yeah.
to you for I mean, maybe it's just being powerful women surrounded by powerful women, and yeah, I love that too, like the power
Yeah.
of friendship. Speaking of support and having people around you, I'm just wondering if I can quickly ask you about how you've, like, through the lens of an adult diagnosis and someone who is very independent, busy running their life and a job that they love and all these extra hobbies and friendships and everything else, how you have found articulating it to your loved ones, people around you, and also whether you've found yourself a bit more vulnerable in terms of asking for help, or like what's that kind of been like?
It's a really interesting one because I'm a bit of an oversharer, so I've never not told anyone how I'm feeling kind of in the moment, really. I first of all, I have a really supportive family. My sister lives about 10-15 minutes walk away from me, so she's really close. My parents are only about an hour away from me. And as a family, we're really close, and we openly tell each other like medical stuff going on with our body. One might say we overshare. So that's been really good. But there's kind of two tones within my family. So my sister is an incredible kind of diabetes ally now. She works in a cafe where she's like a meerkat when an alarm goes off. She'll wait and see what the person's doing, and then if they come up to ask for anything, she's like, do you want me to measure the orange juice for you? So she's like, helping them because she understands, or, like she'll tell them what carbs are in something if she's spotted that the Libra's on, or like they've got a CGM, or she's spotted a pumper, so
Oh,
she kind of
stop.
tries to help. I know, it's wonderful. So when she cooks dinner for me, she'll be like, there's this many carbs in it. And I'm like, okay, is that for the whole meal or the half a meal? She's like, oh, right. Okay. So she's like actively trying to kind of do that. And my mum, bless her, she's wonderful. She did, again, for our stocking, she'd give us chocolate and she'd put on like the carb content of one Ferrero Rocher. She stuck it on with a bit of sellotape.
Oh my
It's like,
goodness me, I'm going to cry.
she's
Oh my
wonderful.
God.
But then also there's an aspect where like my mum doesn't know what happens when my alarm goes off. She hasn't been able to differentiate the two different alarms. So when my hypo alarm goes off, the first thing she says is, what do you need to do? And I'm so looking forward to the companion cards coming out, because I think that my mum's such a visual learner, and it's such kind of bites of information that I think she'll be able to get that, because she's managed to convince herself that it's too much, and it's too much for her to learn about. Whereas actually, I think, yeah, if there's just ways of getting small bits of information, that they're keen to know, and they're very understanding. And I think the first time I bit somebody's head off when I had a low, they were very understanding of the fact that it was just a shaky hypo moment.
Right.
But yeah, I think I've still had friends that have made kind of jokes that have hit a little bit, but I've just told them, don't do that. And some
Nice.
people have gone, oh no, you're absolutely right. That wasn't what I should do. So the people that matter have adjusted kind of some of that stuff that, it falls. And I'm sure that at some point I've said something in the past about sugar and diabetes without realizing how hurtful it might be. So, it will happen, but I think it's about when I've pointed things out that would be helpful or that are unhelpful, people have either done those helpful things or started to adjust the things that might be seen as unhelpful,
Lovely.
which is good. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned right at the beginning that,
Hmm.
you're quite prone to kind of deprioritizing your needs to make sure you meet everyone else's needs.
Yeah.
Has type 1 diabetes put a different slant on that at all, in the sense of like, you kind of have to step up to your own needs or what diabetes is screaming at you? Has that relationship adapted at all? Like, has diabetes taught you anything about yourself, I guess, that maybe you weren't going to give yourself credit for before?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that diabetes has taught me. The deferral of pleasure was one that Nova Rapid definitely taught me, the being patient and waiting. But from a kind of advocating perspective or a putting myself first perspective, yeah, it has. It has because I'm much more capable of saying no as a full sentence now. Um, but I used to be so super busy, and I think the pandemic kind of it stripped out some stuff. But I think I've maybe stripped out too much. So I'm starting to push that back in. I'm starting to kind of make some more space for myself. And I think it's about realizing that in the same way that the decisions that I make are mine to make. I'm kind of trying to change the language that I use, knowing that language is really important. And I've done that a lot with type 1 diabetes, and not calling myself a diabetic is one of them. But with language, it's things like, instead of I don't have the time, it's I'm not making the time for that. And then that has such power, because you're like, why am I not making the time for that? Surely I can. And sometimes making time is lying on the sofa and watching the telly. But if I want to start doing those crazy creative things that I used to do, I need to make that. I need to put in as much effort into that as the other things. So yeah, I maybe need to shift some of my diabetes brain back over a little bit to me and try and make more space for life in my life, as I was saying. Yeah.
Yeah, life in your life. But I think,
Mm,
to give you credit, type 1 diabetes does come crashing in, and there is so much
mm,
to learn, and you have to do it the minute you get up. You don't get a choice to kind of push it to the side today to pay attention to something else. So still so new as well, to
yeah.
say that you're at this point where you're advocating for yourself and you're in tune
Mm.
with your body. Like, to give you credit, that is phenomenal. Not I hope I'm not patronizing you there, but it's
No.
it sounds like there's made, like, because type 1 diabetes, there's an understanding of it in where you're at, that maybe
Mm.
there is more room for the life to come back in, the
I
life in the
think,
life.
yeah, I think so. I think it's, me and Alex, and I'm so glad to have Alex so close as well, because she lives in Leith also. So I'm like a kind of 10-15 minute walk away from her. And so we're kind of always sending each other the text message that nobody else would understand, that says that, oh my God, I had this raging thing happen. Like, I had this terrible hypo, or isn't this a silly thing to have done? Or isn't this frustrating and annoying? And being able to just shout that into a space where there's going to be no judgment and somebody understands is so important, because I think, it's such a ludicrous condition that, it goes from boring, mundane trudging through the daily nonsense to like life-threatening at either end. And but I can eat sweets or drink orange juice and I'm
Yeah.
fine. Like, it
And then you're
feels
celebrating wins, like being able to eat an apple, and it's the
exact
best thing in the world. Yeah.
exactly. Like, there was we might be out of time to tell this story, but I was in a meeting and somebody put apples on the table, and it was within my first week of FIASP. And I was like, yes, I will have an apple. And I injected myself, and 4 minutes
Yeah.
later, I ate an apple. And I was like, that is life changing. And somebody that was in the meeting with me was like, that. I was like, that might seem a little bit dramatic, because I suddenly was aware of people without the context might not understand it. And somebody in the meeting echoed that back to me. And then I thought, you know what? Actually, it's not. And I said, well, previously I couldn't have done that. And I was speaking to my colleague about it afterwards, and he was like, I bet if somebody sitting next to him who had a prosthetic had said, I've got this new prosthetic and it's life changing, they wouldn't have diminished that. But the fact that this minuscule dose of drugs had allowed me to eat a fruit that I love, that I hadn't eaten for 3 years, that is life changing. There's nothing dramatic about that. That's amazing. So yeah, I think I need to just keep advocating.
Oh, I just love it. I feel like I've had a hug for an hour. I feel so topped up. And when I was writing to you about the fiasp situation, it auto-corrected. You noticed I didn't do fiasco. And fiasp has been anything but for you within this fiasco that is type 1 diabetes. So just thank you so much for sharing your insight and your kind of, I love the way you think and this kind of creative approach as well. Like, it's beautiful, and I'm sorry you've had to go through all this, but what a beautiful conversation. Can you tell people where to find you, where to find your art, where to find the projects? Come and say hi and get a virtual hug.
Absolutely. So my Instagram handle, I might get it wrong, I think it's Isla_creative. But you'll also be able to find me through the @100 Days Project Scotland on Instagram, because I'm tagged in all of the stuff in there. So send me anything, a DM on either of those, and it comes through to me.
Wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
To be honest, just a thank you to you without being... I know, without being too sort of soppy about it, but genuinely, you are doing such an amazing thing by putting this podcast and your newsletters out. Like, it's just so important to hear those things said out loud by people who are experiencing all avenues and aspects of this. And I think it's just so important. So I am so excited that I'm a part of that conversation now that I can't tell you. So just, thanks very much.
Oh, that is so very generous, and you've been very, very kind to me over all of these weeks and months, and you know, you cheered me from afar before having met me, and I so appreciate it, because like you, I do sort of sit here going, what is she talking about myself? And to hear you say that is a beautiful thing. So thank you, and I look forward to adding you to the newsletter. Thank you for telling everyone about that, because you will be in the newsletter this week. So if anyone wants to sign up and be able to click directly on this wonderful episode with Isla, type101.com/newsletter. There we go. And I will, of course, put all your information in the episode description so that people can click away and find you as well. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Oh, virtual hugs all around. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Type 1 Please remember that nothing you hear on this podcast should be taken as medical advice. I'm definitely not a healthcare professional. If you like what you hear, hit subscribe and do leave a little review on iTunes if you have time. It really helps to spread the word about type 1 diabetes. And thank you so much for listening.